So fascia is connective tissue, right? And so it's what connects everything in the body.
Yeah.
So at one level, it's sort of like this gluey structure that goes around stuff. And it in terms of the muscles and tendons, it is the tendon. Tendon is fascia or connective tissue that attaches a muscle to a bone.
Yeah.
But then from the tendon, it spreads out and it forms a layer around the muscle, so it envelops the muscle. And then it comes back and forms the tendon that attaches to the other end of the bone, which then goes into the next tendon of the next muscle and then around that. And it goes around every fibre. Have you ever eaten a steak and you see some of the white gristly bits that aren't fat?
Yes.
That's the connective tissue, right? The ligaments and all that sort of stuff that boil down to make gelatin. But it doesn't just go through the muscles. It also goes around the bones and then it goes into the bones. And so
into the bones.
So if you take a wishbone, as a kid, I get a wishbone and drop it in a glass of vinegar.
Yeah.
And then it takes all the calcium out of the wishbone.
Yes.
Right? And then you give it to your brother or some other poor sucker and you try and do the wishbone thing and it bends rather than breaks because all the calcium is gone.
Ah.
So it still looks like a wishbone. It still looks like a bone. But the crystally bits, the calcium bits are gone and all that remains is connective tissue. So bone is largely connective tissue, which is why a kid gets a green stick fracture and an old lady who's lost the connective tissue but still has the mineral content can just snap off at the femur in this way. So fascia is running all through the bones and it's the structure, the matrix that little crystals are laid down on top of to make it firmer. But it's mostly fascia, right? But let me keep going because it just keeps going. You're like, okay, I've got to do muscles in the bones. But it doesn't stop there because it also wraps around all of the nerves. And so it goes around all of the nerves. And, in your brain, you've got white matter and grey matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, the white matter is connective tissue.
Whoa.
Glial cells. And glial comes from glue. And they thought they were just connecting the neurons together. But it's an enormous part of your brain. And so we've got it going through there. But it goes around every organ. It forms like the structure that the cells are laid down into. So if you've got a liver, you can imagine a scaffolding of connective tissue with liver cells sitting on it, so it makes a liver shape, right?
Yes.
It also goes around all the organs, connects all the organs, goes around, it is every ligament, it goes around every tendon, it is every tendon, but it also goes down and forms the cytoskeleton, the skeleton of the cell. So inside the cell, there are things like bones that are connective tissue.
Whoa.
So fascia goes from inside the cell all the way everywhere. So first we've got this thing of like connective tissues everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And your question is about the electric thing, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So that would seem to believe, it's like, okay, we've got glue everywhere, but it's not glue is the point. This is like, we thought it was just glue, that connective tissue was just the scaffolding, and we figured out that it's not at all. And so when it comes to the white matter in your brain, then we've seen that people with a higher IQ don't just have more, they have more white matter. They have more glial cells and connective tissue in their brain. And the connective tissue in their brain, the glial cells, the astrocytes, are moderating the conversation between the neurons and playing an active role in consciousness. And so inside the brain, it plays a really active role in consciousness. But inside the musculoskeletal system, inside the rest of the entire body, is when I was studying anatomy as a sports injury therapist, the nerves that we were familiar with in the musculoskeletal system were involved in this thing called proprioception, which just means where you are in space. So if I can tell that my hand's behind my head and above my head without looking at it, that's because I can feel through proprioception. They're in the joints and in the muscles. They just tell you where you are.
Right.
But that's only a really small amount of the nerves that are in the body, right? And especially in the musculoskeletal system. 80% of them go into a different section of the brain and have nothing to do with where we are in space to stop us bumping into tables. It's this thing called interoception. And interoception means looking in. Huh. So looking in means when you feel in your body, and if you've got a listener at the moment, suddenly try and become aware of your left ear and that you can feel it. And then shift your awareness to your right ear. So without moving, that sense that suddenly you can flood awareness and you can feel what's going on, that's interoception. And interoception travels through fascia. So fascia is the fiber optic cables of consciousness in the body for the body's own sense of what's going on.